Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 81 of the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brooke Olson and Charlie Jewett. We're going to talk about COVID-19 and beyond, because really, as you're saying here, Brooke, everything has changed, and we need to kind of orient to the new realities in all parts of life, and the part we're dealing with is affected as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, I think, Charlie, everything, and I put it here in the title of this one, everything has changed. Our lives are not ever going to be what they were before this happened. Our economy is going to be different, how we connect, how we travel, how we relate. All of these things are really going to challenge us to wake up, to move forward, to be more present for ourselves, for our children, for our friends, for our coworkers, for the people that we don't get along with. I mean, everything that we've been talking about for the last 2 years in these podcasts about becoming more conscious is going to come into play with this. And we've got people in conflict that don't know how to do this. And for those of you and us that, have the capability of upping their game, we can change so much now. I'm seeing parents that I haven't seen before starting to work some stuff out that they hadn't been able to work out. And this is encouraging. I don't know how well it's going to hang, but with some help, we might be able to really make a quantum shift as a society through this process. And this conflict, these high conflict situations that the parents are in, that we're talking to on these podcasts, are just a microcosm of the bigger picture here. So, I want to begin to have that conversation a little bit more today. And as we go forward, this may be just the beginning of this type of a conversation as we start to trip forward in the next weeks.
It is interesting because there's not that big a difference between disengage, and don't go outside. Like, if you don't want the disease, don't be near people, right? If you don't want conflict, don't be in conversation. Like, just don't talk about it. Just let them say whatever they want and then don't respond. Don't go outside.
Yeah. And, with relationships that are high conflict, that is certainly the mantra that we're using and we're trying to push forward when we're talking about more intimate relationships. The same disengage is involved, but we have to circle back. We have to commit to circle back to the conversation after everything has settled in. So.
Right. There could be some really cool analogies we draw out of this whole thing when it's all over. Is like the stay 6 feet apart could be have somebody else read your email. Don't be the one reading them, or do transfers through a third party or whatever it is. Right.
Create space.
Create space. How do you not catch this thing? Because what is it? They get us riled up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's inside of us. There's no way for them to make us be riled up, but being around them and engaging in the conversation, we trip and fall and engage in things that aren't healthy for us or not good for the relationship. So the answer, we may draw some really interesting correlations or analogies between this sort of stay at home, stay 6 feet apart, only engage when necessary, and kind of what we're teaching here. How do you deal with an angry ex or a controlling ex or something?
So part of what we're starting to see here is the restrictions that are being put on us. This shelter at home, the stay separated, to really looking at what travel and what things create the spread of this virus are really coming into some really tough restrictions. And in our previous podcast with Julie Max, Julie and I were talking about these places where there's no resource out there. There's nobody to help. And we're going to have to start to really, again, up our game and figure some of this stuff out, and to really look at, some new considerations that we haven't looked at with regards to our parenting plan, how we deal with the other parent, how we do transfers with our children and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Where in the parenting plan do I press? One of the conversations we were having last week with Julie was part of what the attorneys are saying is stick to the parenting plan no matter what. And then we started to dig into that. And it was like, no, that doesn't make sense, because we're going to start to step outside of the restrictions of what the governors are telling us, what our mayors are telling us, and how do we navigate that conversation, and to wake up in that mess,
Yeah.
be able to be coherent at a time when we need to really come into the conversation and not be overly restrictive.
Yep.
And be able in the long term to be able to stand in front of somebody and have a narrative that makes sense to them for the actions that we take. But what has to happen in this is our ability to, look at where we need to back up.
Yeah.
What are the ramifications if we have close interactions with people? What are the decisions that we're making in this conflict of the other person that are for the family, but also for society at large? Some of the conversations that I'm really starting to try to open up to is, we want what we want. We want to be able to have our needs met with our interactions with our children. And this has been the conflict all along. And the ramifications have been, we're in a fight, and the children are in the middle of that fight. But now we've got another conversation of what happens when we engage in these behaviors and we have an effect on society at large.
Yeah.
It's something that I have not been able to stop thinking about almost constantly for the last almost month now. Yeah. Every interaction that I have with my clients, every interaction that I have with my friends, every interaction that I have with my girlfriend seems to cycle around this whole conversation of, what are our responsibilities? I talked about this last week a little bit, and I'm just going to bring it forward again, just as a trivial piece. But I find myself being pinged because I can't take my horse out on a trail in San Diego because they've closed all the parks and trails.
I know.
And my first indication was, my first impulse in that was, you know what? I'm going to go do that, and they're going to have a hard time catching me on my horse.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh man, that isn't the right thing to be even thinking in this. But that's the impulse that we have, and be able to catch those impulses and then pull back from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of felt that. They shut the beaches here because people were like, well, forget you, we're going to the beach.
Right.
Stop putting these rules on me. And
Right. It's a time for us to all back up and look at the sacrifices that we need to make for the long term. One of the things that, has really been impacting me today, I was reading an article yesterday about, what is it? It was a Netflix show or an HBO show. That they were talking about the world losing 2% of the population, which in this country means, like 6.2 million people. Mm-hmm. And not just the impact of the economy on it, but the impact sociologically on it, physiologically and psychologically, that it's going to have on people with the grief and how that's going to extend beyond. And we're going to have people that lose loved ones in this. And how we look at this and support one another in this is going to be the place where we survive as a society or we crumble.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking of what it would be for the people that care for me if I wasn't here. And it took me into deep sorrow as to how that would affect them. Mm-hmm. And that took me into a place of really wanting to be more conscious about my own self-care and taking care of me so I can take care of them.
Yeah.
and being in consideration of what that means. So, this is an opportunity for us to model and have conversations with our children about just how interconnected we really all are. How somebody, in central China directly affects me and you and everybody else. And how what I do today could affect somebody in Washington or Florida or New York if I choose to travel or I choose to have my children travel.
Right.
And to be consciously aware and to be in conversation about that, and where my needs have got to be set aside for the needs of everybody,
Right.
that I love, and for our children to understand that. One of the things that I'm watching and hearing a lot about, and I know that you're in the middle of this. I don't have children at home anymore, but people are at home going stir crazy.
Yeah.
There's no outlet. Our teenagers who are so socially connected aren't able to hang out with their friends. And there's only so much video time that you can handle. And pretty soon you start to go bleary-eyed and blabbering.
Yep. We've felt that even as adults. There's only so much I can sit on the couch.
Right. So how do we start to recreate something that we've left behind as a society? Because as families, there's a ton of stuff we can do, even over the internet, in order to connect and entertain ourselves.
Right.
And to be able to get creative with that. I had a client, we're talking about how interconnected we all are within our small groups. And this is literally yesterday, I was having this conversation with a client, and as we were finishing our coaching session, she got a text from her ex-husband regarding their 5-year-old. And I'll come back and tell you what that text was in just a minute. But a lot of what we were talking about was this place where she has 2 children with the other parent. And she was really hunkering down and doing the stay-at-home piece with the kids. And she was having conversation with him about, what are you doing to support the shelter in space and create the distance between people. And he was continuing to go to the gym until they shut the gym down. They were doing family outings and stuff with the kids. And that was one piece. But this man's fiance had 2 kids, and their father was not paying attention to stuff going back. And this mother obviously was very concerned, and also knew that there wasn't anything that she could do about it. And she was frustrated, and she was kind of calm in it. It's like, this is what it is. And I know that I can only affect so much, and it's frustrating, and it's discouraging for me, but I'm doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
Literally 5 minutes before we are done with our session, she gets a text from her ex that her 5-year-old daughter has 103 fever.
Oh boy.
Now, don't know that it was COVID-19, could have been the flu, could have been anything else, but it really brought into this conversation that we were having of the levels of denial, the levels of obstinance of, you don't tell me what to do, the place of unconsciously not taking the time to spread this out and to see the bigger picture, again, of how what I do or how what somebody else does reflects me over here, not 6 levels of separation, but 2 or 3, and how rapidly that expands when we're looking at something like this as a pandemic. And I think that part of the gold at the end of this is that we're all going to, if we can have these kinds of conversations, if we can bring them forward to the people that we know, and we can start to create our own pandemic of information going outwards, that we can start to really understand the place where we are so intimately interconnected across the world, across cultures, across country lines, and that we can start to act accordingly and teach our kids how to really start to evolve this going forward. It's an incredible opportunity, and it's scarier than hell, but sometimes it takes destroying everything to be able to rebuild in a way.
Exactly. Well, it's gotten our attention, that's for sure. That's what you have to first get if you want somebody to change or whatever, is their attention, right? So as humanity, as a world, it's definitely got our attention.
Yeah. Yeah, and how impatient have we become? How impatient have we become as parents, and our children being impatient of, going into boredom and having to go do something, or I've got to get out of here, or I've got to get lost in something. And this, we're always talking in this class and these podcasts about creating a container so we can surf those difficult sensations, those sensations of impatience and wanting to express and get things moving, and learning how to just be. I was having a conversation with my girlfriend the other day, and she's giving me crap about going into my phone at every break. And I was like, yeah, I'm missing connection here by getting lost in the trauma of what's going on out there. So setting those things down, and just, we've started to turn off the television, to turn off our phones, to turn off our computers, and sit out on the deck or sit down on the patio and sip on some tea and chat about things that are not this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Learning how to connect and bring our kids into those conversations as well. I think it's important too, Charlie, and I know that, you and I have a lot of conversations around this, but this is this place where, as parents, we get to learn how to do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to.
Right.
Children are starting to see where the structure is and where the lack of structure is. This is a window that is opening to what's happening within families and what's happening within the connections between parents and their children, and parents and parents. And what I'm seeing, and I talked about this a little earlier, is there are places where children are starting to see parents work together where they haven't worked together before.
Mm-hmm.
There's some patterns that are starting to change, and there's some new possibilities that are arising out of this. And I'm seeing it in my classes and with the parents that I'm working with, that there's a whole group of people that we talk about. We talk about that 30% of people that that are in high conflict in these arenas, and that there's a section of those, that there's a 30% of them that are entrenched in conflict, but there's not a personality disorder. There's not a something outside a pathology that's driving it. It's just this entrenchment that they've had over a long period of time. And under these conditions, the possibility of that changing seems to be becoming more possible. They're starting to show up and go, wow, we've got to work this out, because one, we've been screaming to court, and we're not going to be in court for the next 3 months or 5 months or 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to start to figure this out differently. And, as a parenting coordinator and a mediator, I'm having more people come forward and being able to go, okay, I can start to adjust here. I mean, it's like, it was that point where everything got reached and the possibility actually came into alignment where it could start to make the shift. And then we have to also remember that other 70% of this high conflict group, which is again 30% of the total, that there is personality disorder, there is pathology, there is something else that's driving that is pretty permanent. And what we might start to see is some temporary shift. And we have to be careful not to get caught in the flypaper of that.
Mm-hmm.
And just, again, really super paying attention and utilizing all the tools that you guys have acquired through the podcast and through working with me directly and through the classes.
Right.
Practicing boundaried flexibility. What does that mean?
Interesting phrase, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boundaried flexibility. This is the place that we can get a little sticky in, because we have to show some level of flexibility in what we're doing. If we don't, if we stay entrenched in this, if we withhold children and we're really not clear on why we are, or people are withholding the children and it's not a legitimate call, how do we back up and let this unfold for the next 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks? And have somebody that has been exercising a major amount of power and influence over how we get to see our children, flex their muscle in that, and know that when we get to the other side of this, that's going to be a bug and not a feature for them.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to be patient, but also on the other side of that, to be willing to be flexible around allowing our children to go to the other parent's house. Again, another client that I have in the last few days, one of the parents works in the healthcare world. And they said to the other parent, this isn't good for our child to come here and pass this around. I don't want to infect you. I don't want to infect your family and then have our child go out and do more damage in the world there. And that parent was insistent on continuing to do the change. Mm-hmm. There's a backwards one for you, right?
Yeah, really backwards. Weird.
And, being able to set a new boundary with saying no.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I'm not going to be here. I'm going to isolate someplace else.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to deal with it. Some strange things going on.
Very.
And problem solving. We've got to up our problem solving. We've got to really be able to step back with our kids. Again, working with clients just now, I'm seeing some of them that have struggled for years coming together and working out temporary situations, solving the problems for the next 30 days or the next 2 months, and not getting too far out, but just we're in the moment. And I think that that's an opportunity for some traction to start.
Yeah.
How about this? How about that? Would this work? But every one of those situations where I've helped them solve the problems have been around the conversation of society at large, the bigger picture, not just how it affects them, but how it affects the people around them. Mm-hmm. And virtually how it affects you, how it affects me.
Yeah.
And I think that consciousness is an important piece for us to keep coming back to and hammering on. You've been a little quiet here. You got any thoughts on some of this, Charlie?
No, not as much on today's show. It's interesting to listen to you talk about this, but it is. I can see how a shakeup like this just creates all new paradigms, and it could be good for some of these relationships because you are sort of forced to work together in times of crisis, and it makes people more flexible to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everybody's a little nicer around the holidays, just in general. More people say hi and offer hot cider or whatever. There's something about crisis like this that sets them a bit more in the problem solving mode than war mode, or how do I punish you for what you've done to me mode or whatever.
Yeah, it certainly can. And like in other times of stress, it's also a place where people don't wake up in the moment and start to do the right thing. It really shows long term.
Mm-hmm.
People are watching, and people are, I said this last week again on the podcast with Julie. When the courts do reopen and some of this stuff starts showing up in front of some of these judges, they're going to be really cranky.
Mm-hmm.
Their dockets are going to be whacked full.
Mm-hmm.
And when they start to hear some of the stuff that's going to bleed through the narratives, they're going to be pissed. And it's not going to go well for people who are not focusing on what needs focused. And I'm going to throw this piece in to the conversations for everybody again. Everything that you're doing during this time needs to be in writing with the other parent. It has to be, through our family wizard. It has to be in a format that you can grab a hold of and that you can show what's going on. Because if there's withholding, or there's lack of flexibility, or there's bad judgment and decision making, and if you're going back to court for a modification, or you're in a 730 evaluation, or any of these things, this is going to be a time where people are looking at, really, those are the decisions you made.
Right.
That shows a lot. So don't be cavalier. I mean, problem solving, we can do in discussion. If I do a parenting coordinating piece, I will do a summary and I will send it out. And then I have expectations for all of my clients. All of my clients work with a different format, particularly our family wizard, a couple of the others that are out there, but where they're going to be able to, and I'm going to be able to see what's going on. And it slows things down. It makes people think better about what they're doing. And for me, as a professional in it, I can hold their feet to the fire and help them make better decisions as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the effects of this, and I'm assuming we're going to have a pretty big wave of people that fall behind on their child support, with everybody, with so many industries struggling to continue the same income or out of work completely.
Yep.
The $1,200 from the government or whatever we're going to end up getting is not going to cover, 3-4 months of child support.
Right.
So that's going to be interesting to see how people handle that too, because there is a component. I'm thinking about when you say when you get back into the courts, the judges are going to see some of the decisions, and it could highlight some of the behaviors that we've wanted the judges to notice, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There's a fairly large chunk of parents that if you don't pay child support, they refuse to let you have the kids. They think that's okay for some reason, and that'll probably show up in this next season.
Right. It's going to be an interesting wave that everybody's going to have to surf. There's going to be things that are going to slip in that we're just starting to think about, and I've been thinking about a lot of things that I hadn't thought about more than about once, the child support issue. And of course it's going to be an issue. People are going to have to go back and get modifications and all of that. And what happens between the time, I do not want to be a clerk at the family court. Those poor people are going to be flooded with so much. And the more that our listeners and people can work this stuff out themselves, and I can't express enough where the alternative dispute resolution outlets that are available to everybody are such a better movement than the courts. I mean, the mediators in every county across this country understand the equations of child support and stuff. And if things need to be modified, income statements can be drafted with these people, and it can be money in, money out, and we can figure out what's going on. And what I've always told people in the child support equation is at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, and they go into a machine and they spit out a number. And that's what you're going to do, and you're going to find a way to do it. And if you can't do it, you know, the other parent needs to figure it out, or you need to figure out how to help it out. And to be in resistance to it is taking your eye off the ball about the kids. You know, I see, you know, the child support piece consistently in my world, and oftentimes that there's an unbalanced or an imbalanced situation, and you just have to, you know, pull it together, show the imbalance, and then have somebody help you. You guys can't do this on your own. You never have been able to. And, you know, getting a mediator in this piece is cheaper and more effective than fighting it out and going to court with an attorney. And even if you're going pro per, which many people do, the expense of time and the frustration of getting there is expensive. So,
yeah,
you know, again, finding different ways to solve the problem.
Right.
Cool. Anything else, Charlie?
No, we'll just see if handshaking makes it through as a tradition or not. You say the world's going to change. I know we're all going to be like Howie Mandel, like fist bumping or elbow bumping or whatever.
Right.
It is an interesting thought, though. It's like, here's this tradition that's pretty easily transfers germs. What if this this thing I've known my entire life just disappears or goes away?
Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. I hope this has been helpful. Join us again next week for another round of this. And again, I want to remind everybody, as I did at the beginning of this, that we do have a private Facebook group that you can join that has a lot of good resources, including, you know, some discounted services and access to webinars. So take a look at joining it. The name of the Facebook group, again, is the High Conflict Divorce Support for Parents, and the URL on it is facebook.com/groups/high conflict divorce support.
Perfect. We'll see you there.
Take care, everybody.